Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at EduTech 2020. Before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment to thank our partners, Zendesk, Amazon Web Services, Dell Technologies, PayPal, Lead Squared, and RedSeer. Without further ado, let me introduce you all to our speakers for the session. That is a panel discussion on online test preparation, fastest growing market within EdTech. To moderate the session, we have with us Mr. Devendra Agarwal, founder of Texture Capital Advisors, who will be joined by our esteemed set of panelists, Dr. Gaurav Garg, co-founder, Study IQ Education, Mr. Ayush Bansal, founder and CEO, iDreamCareer.com, Mr. Kapil Gupta, CEO and co-founder, NeetPrep.com, and Mr. Sahil Chalana, founder, College Dunya. Over to you, Mr. Agarwal.
Thanks. Welcome everyone for this session on the test prep. We have an esteemed set of panel, and one of the very interesting thing about the panel is the most of the founders in the panel, all of them run test prep or related company, and all of them are either completely bootstrapped or probably raised minimalistic funding. So we'll hear the whole saga of a lot of funding happening in EdTech versus a lot of founders who are trying to build in a very efficient manner. What I'll do is probably first to the panelists talk about like maybe in a couple of minutes about their background, and then I'll dive into questions that I have for the panel. So Kapil, if you can start with your quick like couple of minute background. Just briefly, when did you start Neat Prep? What is it about, and your very brief journey?
Sure. Thank you, Devin. I am Kapil. Did my engineering from IIT Delhi. Worked for some time in India. Went to US. Did my MBA, and was a civil engineer by profession till 4 years back. When we started NeetPrep.com with four co-founders. The organization actually started on the day the NEET exam was invented by Supreme Court on 9th May 2016. And we got on that opportunity, took a lot of inspiration out of offline setups, which have made it big, brand focus, specialized offerings like what Akash, a Fiji, or a Resonance would do. And we have tried to replicate the same thing in online space. The motto is very simple: provide access to great quality teachers in remote areas for those students who cannot afford but never lack in aspiration and ambition, which a metro kid would have. So what we have been able to do in the last 4 years is we are focused on this exam called NEET. 3.2 million kids are preparing for the exam at any given point of time. We are today one of the largest online coaching for NEET preparation. More than 50,000 kids pay to study from our platform, and we expect a lot of selections this year. That is obviously the hallmark of ultimately whether you are helping kids or not, and that's why we are very excited to be on this platform.
Thanks, Kapil. Ayush, my request is if you could probably quickly tell the audience about your background. Request is keep it very brief, like probably within like one and a half minute.
So Devendra, thanks. I run a tech startup in the space of career guidance for high school and called as iDream Career, and we also recently launched a upskilling platform for high school students on various careers and future of work, commerce and art skills called as IDX.education. Been running this for the last 8.5 years now.
Thanks. About your quick background, and then we'll go to the next person, Sahil, as well. Gaurav?
Hi, so my name is Gaurav. I was a passionate educator, I still am, and I decided to convert that passion into my profession. And in 2014 December, we started as a very small, in a one-room setup. We started a small coaching for Study IQ Education. Today we are an online edtech company. We are not operational into offline, and this is the 6th year running for our startup. We are a completely bootstrapped startup, only backed by our own ambition and our own hard work.
Super. Sahil, if you could quickly talk about your what do you do?
So we are College Dunya. So we started College Dunya in 2014 with the ambition of letting every student get the best college according to his own capabilities. So it's more like our vision is that whatever your percentage is, you should be able to get the best college. We started with, we were the only website who invested massively in collecting college reviews, in fee structures, brochures, so that we want to make the life of a college going student easy. So how am I related to test prep is basically we also provide the students who are going for colleges mock test papers, information about exams like JEE, NEET, CAT, MBA exams, when are they happening, and very small exams which they should not miss out. This is we are not directly related. We might have some clients related to test prep, but since we have the same audience, we have been associated with test prep space.
Thanks everyone. We'll dive right into the panel. So the first question is to Gaurav. Gaurav, you built Steady IQ. You said that you're bootstrapped, and I saw I saw you guys have a YouTube channel on which you guys have like 8.5 million subscribers. You guys have huge paid subscribers on your app, right? So how does it feel when we have this whole edtech saga where we see everyone, not everyone, like we have like pretty large funding rounds getting announced. People are hitting milestones of being unicorn or decacorn, and those milestones are being celebrated by traction. The journey that you're taken is pretty impressive. So I just wanted to probably quickly check thought process that goes into founder's mind while building the company, and how you think about whole journey of being bootstrapped versus raising capital.
Thank you for your question. I think I think it reflects on media actually that they only cover industries when they get funded. So probably raising funding, even when not required, has become a sort of a PR exercise. I think we can run sustainable businesses. We can run businesses in a very sustainable and old school manner. And I think it depends on the DNA that you have. So I don't have the DNA where I burn cash to acquire consumers. I am, as I said, I was an educator. I still am an educator at heart, and I believe that the merit that an educator possesses should be reflected in his pedagogy, his didactic abilities, his teaching, and it should not require money to therefore attract students. So I've always believed in that. I've always believed in my and our organization's various faculties, their kind of teaching, and it's just I think it's a matter of taste whether you wish to raise funding or you not. But one thing I firmly believe is that you can definitely survive even if other companies raise huge funding. They cannot touch you in any way if you stick to the basics, if you stick to the content. And in edutech, the problem is that the people are focusing too much on tech and they forget the word edu. So I think edutech will always remain about edu only, and content will always remain the king.
Great. I'll probably take the same question with Kapil, who is building NEET Prep, and I believe Kapil, you are also bootstrapped completely. Kapil, in your segment, we have seen iconic companies like Bansal Classes, even Resonance till 2010, they did not raise any capital. A lot of other companies, even Ellen, which is a 1,000 crore company, did not raise any capital, right? So do you think the capital is a necessity to success for a tech company, or given a tech company are doing well, the capital chasing and founders are getting enamored and probably taking the funding? And does having capital, what's your objective? Having capital, is it necessary thing? Does it really benefit, or it can actually create some kind of pressure situation as well for an entrepreneur to deliver on certain metrics which investor expects, and certain behavior which may not be necessarily needed by entrepreneur in terms of selling, etc. So I just quickly wanted to check your thoughts, Kapil, on the whole funding piece, given I think you guys are also bootstrapped.
Sure. I do believe, Deven, that funding is important to the extent that if you want to grow quickly, and there is a market which is going very quickly from an offline to online mode, and you want to build your distribution, you want to reach each and every child in the country who's your prospect, then if you want to do it quickly, funding does help. But as Gaurav said, ultimately it comes down to what content you are delivering, how responsibly you are handling the fact that what you are going to do with the child is going to decide what he is going to do for next 40 years. And I do believe someone like Mr. Bansal, Mr. Verma, Mr. Jitki Chaudhary, the organizations that they have built fundamentally started from the premise that a parent is outsourcing the responsibility of educating their child to us. What we are going to do with the child is going to decide what he is going to do for his life. And we are going to make sure that we are standing with the child till the day of the exam and even guiding him when he's going to go into the exam. So I do believe funding plays a role, but beyond the point, as Gaurav said, content is the king. I also want to say that in this whole space in test prep, the economics is such that you have to be very, very careful in terms of what your cost of acquisition is, because it is not like a Uber or a Flipkart that someone uses you once and is going to use you for life. You have to make the whole transaction economically viable, assuming that the transaction is going to happen only once. And that is something, again, in offline space, people have done. In online space, not many people have done, but whoever is able to do it would be able to build a profitable business, which also has this aspect that it behaves with extreme responsibility, because the child's career, what he's going to do for next 40 years, depends on what you're going to do with it.
That's quite great, Kapil. And that reminds me, even till Byju's got its first funding through Aryan Capital in 2013, and I'm not too sure how many people will associate Aryan Capital with Byju's. Actually was an offline company and was self-funded, and Baiju sir was a teacher and still a teacher. So that basically premises that teachers build the company in education. And yes, sometimes technology and funding could probably take it a little ahead. I have a question for you. So you are quite passionate about career, and you run a company which guides people about career. You are building it for 8 years. So actually, I've been mentoring people, and I've seen students after their 9th class, 8th class, 10th class come for career decisions. So in terms of number of people who come out, I believe that number of people who come out for career decision are much larger than even the people who are for test prep. But I don't really see that thing really building out. And second thing which I see that in India, but I would say test prep is probably an Indian phenomena, given JEE, NEET, etc. Indian phenomena. I don't see any large test prep company in US, any listed company in like US in test prep, right? So, and people I see in the career, like in banking, etc., people who are non-engineer, non-MBA, sorry, non-medico, they are like doing very well. So how do you see, given you have been seeing the career journey of students, and how do you see the whole thing prior to student going for a test prep as an option?
So, essentially career guidance, as you rightly said, is the first step. Once you decide career, then you go towards the point that, okay, the part to reach that career requires an entrance exam to be cleared, and then you go to a test product, right? But if you see the start of the funnel towards choosing a right career and reaching the right career guidance. Now, I always say this, for us, the competition is with the parent mindset and not with any other edtech company which is in the market for in the space of career guidance. The market size is huge, and no one has been able to, probably succeed at scale. And essentially, also, if you see and compare career guidance as a segment in comparison to any large edtech company space of test prep, anything, not such large scale Series A, B, C round of funding has happened, right? So, having said that, career guidance plays a vital role. And if you see the sales funnel, the unfortunate part is the larger edtech companies are utilizing the word career guidance in the part of the sales process, right? So the first sales process is get career counseling session free. And this is something not new. Previously, the offline coaching center used to go in the school saying that we are going to do career counseling workshop, right? Generate lead and then call them and convert them for their test. So the market is driven and influenced by the test prep companies using career counseling for a different purpose. So market never was aware or educated on the actual need of career guidance. But when this entire engineering jobs market fell in the country, that's where parents started to realize, should we even send our kid to a tier 2, tier 3 college or not? Because the jobs in the engineering segment were really reducing, and that's where they realized, okay, if not engineering, then what? And that's when the last 3 years we have seen that the career guidance demand has tremendously increased from all the stakeholders, whether it is parent, whether it is student, private school, or state government, or the central.
Great, great. That's very interesting perspective, Ayush. Sahil, you really come just after the test prep journey, right? People give test prep. You run one of the largest portal to look for colleges. And yes, everyone has heard name of IITs, IIMs, etc. But we see that India in very unique position of education where we have seen a lot of new colleges like Ashoka, Palaksha, a lot of new universities, a lot of universities like corporates like Generals or Bennett, etc. These are coming, right? So do you really feel that students are completely lost in this journey? They really don't have to guide, really don't have data to say which universities are out, because a lot of magazines publish the ratings, and I used to find in 2001 India Today used to publish rating, and I used to find IIT and the top 10. I used to get surprised, right? So given such an information asymmetry that exists and students are not really having a quality information, so how does College Dunia help students, and then how do you see this whole journey between test prep and the students who would not really get into like top 1%, 2%, how they will really decide, and what should be sort of the right thing to be done for those students from a provider of you can say college advice, or from that perspective.
So, one thing is for sure. So, we at College Dunia, our aim is to guide the student to the best college according to his abilities. Now, we generally, right now, we just partner, doing some bit of career counseling, but that is not our forte. We want to do it with product, prediction tools, the content. So first, we have a lot of college predictor and rank predictor tools like JEE Rank Predictor or NEET Rank Predictor. So once this is based on last year data and this year expected data. Once a person has just taken the entrance exam, he uses our tool to predict his rank and the college he will get. This is where one of the ways in which we help. So what happens is there is a lot of world beyond the IITs and IIMs or the aims of the world which you will make once. Let's say your JEE main rank is 20,000 or 30,000 or whatever it is. Your percentile is that level. This is where we at College Dunia have invested massively in content which is college reviews. So we have 2 lakh college reviews of students across India. Our college reviews are not just that you write a 1 paragraph review. You have to write everything about placements, about extracurriculars. You have to write about the internships. What is the course per curriculum? So one of the things we also believe that after some level, the college selection is also about what suits you. So there are students who want great extracurriculars and are willing to pay a more. There are students who just want great placements and don't want to pay a lot of fees. So there is like everything for everyone. We want to put all the content out in front of the student and let him decide. So part of the reason, example I give it is what TripAdvisor and Booking.com did to the hotel industry. 2001, 20 Goas of the world, we travel agents just after your life saying ki ye hotel le lo, wo hotel le lo. And come to now, and whenever you choose the hotel, you know what you are choosing. You've read the reviews, and then you choose online. You pre-booked it. The same experience is going to happen to college, and we've already launched a common application form wherein you can apply to 500 colleges just under one umbrella. So we visualize a world, maybe 5 years hence, slowly and slowly, wherein you could apply to all the colleges at one, just through us. Pay their first year fees just through us. We can give you some scholarships, and if you go through us. So we want to be your first point interaction before you enter your college. I see that happening more and more.
Superb. I think that's very, very great perspective, Sahil. Gaurav, one of the question I come to my favorite question of funded player and their behavior with respect to customer, right? So I've seen great teachers. I've been taught by likes of Mr. V.K. Bansal, Mr. Verma, who built great institution as well. And I saw for them, the student was first. I used to see a lot of students used to come, people who would not really get into their interest test, they would actually be denied an opportunity despite their losing revenue, right? So we used to have those kind of teachers who used to put student as a focus first, and they will keep their student career above their business. What I see very strangely, if I see my Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn timelines, I see one post probably either bashing likes of Byju's or Whitehead Junior for their sales strategies, right? So, do you very like aggressive sales, right? So, do you think is this driven by whole funding aspect that people are getting so aggressive in terms of you can say trying to create fear in the minds of parent ki, look, if you don't take this the child will really fall behind, or creating that guilt in the parent mind? What's your comment on that? Is it funding driven? Is it entrepreneurs own success driven? And is it even right thing to do?
So, Devender, first of all, we are into a very different space. As a company, our users are between the age of 20 and 30. So, I don't actually cater to that segment where I can, scare the parents and get the fee. My 99% of my users, they pay from their own pocket. Like, for example, they are already working somewhere, they want to prepare for IAS. They are working somewhere, they want to prepare for some government exam, like that. So I want to comment on what sort of a practices or best sales practices are required to drive the sales in the pre 18 years, segment, the K-12 segment or JE. Maybe Kapil or someone like that would be able to better throw some light on that. Insofar as your first question is concerned, I think that's a very important question. Have the profits taken a precedence over the ethics of a teacher? I think it's only fair to assume that if you have an investor sitting over your head, obviously these venture capitalist firms, they would also have to again be answerable to the people from which they have raised funds. And there is a cycle of 5 to 7 year exits which most companies follow. So in such a scenario, it's but obvious that these companies will put pressure on the CEO of the company which they are funding to show the numbers. And in such a scenario, even if a teacher would want to let's say let go of some of the revenue, I think these players will not let them. I'll give you one example. You mentioned Baiju. I was a student of Baiju when he was a teacher for CAT, and I think he's one of the finest teachers that I've seen in my life. I was lucky that he used to teach personally to us in Manipal. It was one place where he used to say to us that it is very close to his heart, and I saw firsthand his passion for teaching. But you see that he is not teaching anymore. So that means that he is looking at the business side of things, and somewhere in this entire process, his own capability as a teacher has kind of taken a backseat. So I think this also kind of reinforces the fact that the business side of things will be irreversible in a funded setup, because you have so many people to answer.
Great, Gaurav. Ayush, would you like to take it? Given you are the closest to people who are coming to you post your career guidance intent, so we see all this fear or panic or you can say guilt factor being created in the mind of parent that if you don't take these courses, your child would really fall behind. So, do you think that's a sort of right thing, or how you would? What's your take on that? Ayush, you're in mute. Ayush, you're in mute, sir.
So it's an internal trigger, which is a FOMO created among parents, and if you don't teach your kid coding, then he or she won't become Sundar Pichai, and Sundar Pichai coded and he started coding at the age 6 and all of that, right? And we Indians have a very bad habit of not verifying these information. If you compare the ads of Whitehead in India and US, they are not putting those ads in US. Otherwise, the founder would be behind the bars. They have 50% of revenue coming from US, right? They don't put Sundar Pichai picture in US or Satya Nadella picture or Bill Gates picture in US, because over there the laws are stricter, and if a parent puts in a case, it would become very that would be very tricky and painful. But in India, parents they don't even research on whether that marketing information being created is right or not, right? And parents have aspiration, and they're very, very well emotionally connected to their child future. And I think I wouldn't make a generalized statement, but most of the edtech players are doing that. right? One of the edtech companies had said that 61% of the jobs in the future would require coding, right? I sent a WhatsApp to that founder, I don't want to name it, and said, this is something which is there in US, and that too for a certain category, only in STEM careers. So parents don't research on it, but that's an aspiration, it's a FOMO, which these players are trying to capture, and then there is a peak for it. You will reach a peak for it, right? And I believe from there on that will be U-turn. And I always believe in the education, especially pre-COVID, it required depth. As you mentioned, Baiju himself was a teacher for 7 to 8 years before getting his first round of funding in 2013. It requires depth to establish quality, to establish learning outcome, right? To establish tangible impact in any edtech or any teaching product or service. So I believe, it's a matter of time when it will go bust, and a lot of such products are being busted for sure, and parents now have an idea because eventually they will speak about it.
Great. So I do agree that I somewhere I've been blessed with great teachers, and I have slight bit of bias when there's a teacher at the helm of the affairs. It's likely that they will be probably at least be able to understand the student pain. I see in Baiju's, in Vedantu, all the founders were teachers when they were in Laksha. I saw same thing in Bansal classes, Resonance, lot of other institute. Kapil, I'll come to you, given we are talking about teachers, right? And teachers and the mode. So we see three modes of delivery today. One is offline, which is standard, has been running from 20 years, likes of Resonance, Bansal classes, or FitG, Narana have been doing completely classroom led offline this thing. Second, we've seen live classes, which is being done by likes of Vedantu, even Unacademy. And third, we have seen Baiju, which has been completely product driven. Like, let me build a fabulous product, let me package the product, let me sell the product. Now Baiju started live, but till very recently they were not doing that. So what's your take on that? Do you think offline is the right medium for student, or is live classes, or is like only product driven? What's your take from student perspective? What's the right thing for the student, and what is the more sort of sustainable thing going forward?
Even I think in an ideal world, you would want your kid to study one-to-one from the best teacher, in our case, NEET, for physics, chemistry, zoology, and botany. But if that thing costs 2.5 to 3 or 4 lakhs a year, some of the teachers who work on our platform are fairly expensive. They're also very good. So what that does is it pushes out vast segment of the country with respect to good test preparation. So then a coaching class came up in which there are going to be 50 or 100 students in the class. That would still at 70, 80,000 rupees a year. Then an online program comes in where you do not get the physical touch and feel, and if you will, the controlled environment of a classroom. But you know what? I have only 20,000 rupees a year to prepare. My option is I can't go to a coaching. I can study from books by myself. In between, there is this option of 20,000. Now, we have students in more than 500 districts across the country. Our course is primarily purchased by students who cannot afford to go to a classroom coaching. It's a separate matter that since COVID, there is no classroom coaching. But I do believe that if you envision the whole country as a pyramid, on top of it would lie a very fabulous one-to-one, super quality teacher teaching one-to-one, and student might be spending 5 lakh, 6 lakh rupees a year. Below that would be Akash and Alan, 80 to 90,000 rupees a year. Below that, there is a 20,000 rupee a year segment where you can give quality at an affordable cost, with the nuance being that you are not going to get a controlled environment, and you are not going to have a physical touch and feel, a physical peer group. But I do believe what has changed is in our age group, we might not be able to fathom it. When I see my kid who is in class 6, he is very, very comfortable with technology, and he does not feel that difference, which we feel very worried and very afraid about. So I think that is where the opportunity is. When the COVID situation ends and classroom coachings are going to open, so many students would have had this experience of classroom, this experience of online. Their parents would have seen a lot of this pushback was coming from parents that you can't do online, you have to go to a classroom coaching. They would have seen it is perfectly okay. I don't have to mortgage my house to send my kid to Kota. So it is going to be a phenomenal social experience, whether how many people actually show up to Kota and how many people would like to spend that money when they can get similar or better quality teacher at home for 20,000 rupees a year. So that for me is an open question. I think classroom coaching is dead forever.
Great. Kapil, that's a great perspective to know. Sahil, I have been asked this question from the investors when I was raising capital, when I was with Resonance, and when I raised capital for a couple of startup as part of Dexter Capital. So people ask me about regulation because except few areas, our entire education industry is regulated. Our education industry is pretty big, like more than $80 billion. We really don't have any public listed company now. In private, we have multi-billion dollar companies. So we used to ask, like, what is the regulatory threat for test prep? And I used to say to them that the biggest threat for the regulatory test prep is you can take the regulation away completely, and if you can improve the quality of all schools completely. So given your segment, which is deals with colleges, university, there's a lot of regulation. So what's your perspective of the whole regulatory thing? A lot of things happening, new education policy coming. What do you really think of the regulation impacting, you can say, our education industry or test prep industry specifically?
So, a couple of points. So, if you, so what is happening is, if we are into the education business, we see college business. So, we see colleges who are running just for profit and who had very subpar teachers are closing down. A lot of them are closing down who provided. Now, this is because of student feedback, or this is because of us listing out bad reviews or something like that, because you are investing a lot and if there is a college in Sonipat who's not providing any education value, will close down. Now what regulation ends up doing is and especially when you have an environment in which colleges cannot make profits, right? And the NEP still does not address that. We cannot have for profit colleges. So there is no real skin in the game unless and until you are opening a college just for the good of it, which is like Ashoka's and the Bennett's, wherein people don't want to do good. But if I really want to make money and I really want to provide value, which happens in test prep, it is not there. One of the things which I really see is because regulation takes a long time. You cannot launch just tomorrow. You and me think that let's launch BTech in data science and data science only, and I don't think we'll get permission for that. But that is the need, right? Let's launch BTech in business analytics. We'll just teach business analytics and nothing else. We'll not go ahead. And so there are 2 to 3 things which will happen after COVID. First, a lot of people will not go to college. They will feel it's okay to go for a degree or a certificate. NEP actually addresses that 1-year diploma certificates will be counted, that part. If I just go to 1 year in college, I can have a diploma part, that part of NEP. So a lot of students will not go to college. They'll go for diplomas in data science and all. And this part will really, really boom, wherein the courses which are hot for the industry will actually boom. I ask you a simple question. Let's say I'm from a small town. I do BSc from a course, from a small college in Hardoi. What is the value which I'm adding for the 3 years which I'm studying there? The answer is zilch. Give me a course on 6 months on basic data science, or genuinely, not like White Hat Junior, help me code. 1 year HTML or UX or any other course. Give me maybe, and I'll get a job. I am very sure that I'll employ this guy versus a normal BSc guy, and there is no return. So, and see what regulation will end up doing is it will kill colleges so fast that you'll not realize. So unregulated industry of course providers like the upgrads of the world, you'll have a lot of people who will be launching their own brand of course. There are a lot of startups like Pesto, Attain You, which are coming up, which are teaching people, and they're not associated to any university, providing a lot of value. So I see a universe in which them thriving, the number of the number of people choosing college education really going down, and and this is going to, in the next 4 years, you'll see a lot of colleges closing down at the speed you would not have imagined. And I don't know how government. So the biggest problem with government is when you say everything the more you regulate, the more you kill. So it's not the government. So it's like, the government is in regulation is ensuring that the colleges are getting killed. See, जो भी होता था resonance वगैरह में, when I used to take education, I from BITS, right? The quality of teachers in BITS was very, very bad. I did not want to get up in the morning and go to their classes. For most of them, 90% of them. But when I actually went to resonance, the teachers, because it is capitalism or something like that, I wanted to study. I genuinely wanted to study with them, and because they have skin in the game. Tomorrow I can, what if I don't like a bits mein professor ka class? That guy, the professor still ends up making money, doing whatever it is. But if you are in a coaching institute, you're not teaching well, you are laid off. On Unacademy, if you don't get enough views on your, on your videos, they ask you to leave. This is capitalism at play.
Great. I hope, Sahil, I hope none of your BITS professor is listening to this video.
Let them listen, let them innovate, let them actually find teachers which there are 10% teachers who really, unki class पूरी full रहती है and 90% की खाली रहती है. I don't know why 90% exists. I'm sorry. Teaching is a sane profession if you can attract students. I don't want to profess ethics for teachers who cannot attract students. If you're not good enough, I'm sorry, you're not good enough.
Absolutely. So I can talk about resonance bit because I was a student of that. They actually do it great because founder is a teacher. He's a quite passionate teacher, and they do feedback. They do teacher training. When JEE happens on that day, they actually ask all the teachers to take the exam. They sometimes ask their top teachers to take the exam along with the student. And then obviously teacher is scared if I score less marks than student, then I would not do well, right? So there are a lot of things they have to do to maintain the academic quality. I'll come to my last question, and then I'll open the panel for questions from audience. And the last question I'll go to Gaurav first, and then probably I would request each panelist to probably let's just take 1 minute to answer the question. So my question is emerging from the discussion I was doing with one of the top partner from a large equity fund. The partner was completely, you can say, disagreeing with the whole funding cycle that's happening. He said that we are in a classical bubble, the kind of bubble that happened for internet companies in 1999. And his point was a bubble happens when you are in peak for everything. You are peak because all the capacity that you can utilize that's happening now. Your revenue is happening. Companies are booking revenue not for 1 year. They're booking revenue for 5 years. And then valuation is being done on ARR basis, which is on your peak month. It's like you are choosing an ice cream company's revenue in month of like June, right? And then you're multiplying the peak value, right? So he says, look, we are in a huge bubble, and I'm not really sure this journey will sustain post-COVID. So my question to Gaurav and then all these guys is, this journey can be broken pre-COVID, in COVID, post-COVID. Do you think this journey for EdTech company would sustain in post-COVID era? Or do you think both in terms of business momentum as well as fundraise momentum, you see the slowdown really? Let's start and then I'll let each panelist take like 1 minute to answer the question.
I think it's a great question. It requires a lot of pondering work. And the answer is this. It's not like all the edutech companies are doing great post-COVID. Again, this is an impression that media gives you. I can tell you 10 companies who are my friends, who are co-founders, founders of edtech companies, their revenue hasn't increased by a penny in the post-COVID world. So first of all, we should not be into this impression that in post-COVID world, every edtech company is becoming a millionaire, number one. Number two, edtech was always here to thrive. It's just, we can talk about the acceleration, that's all. What COVID has done is remove that kind of a mental block, because during in the post-COVID world, before this, the online education was always seen as an adjuvant to the offline. The serious aspirants would always study offline, and they will take some courses here and there, but they will never make the online education as the mainstream. This was a huge mental block. But now, in the post-COVID world, when there is no choice, and students are finally realizing, and they will get selected with the online education also, this will accelerate the pace of adoption of online learning. So I think COVID has done the same to edtech, which demonetization did to the wallet companies. So, but it would be unfair to say that in a post-COVID, like COVID is that watershed moment. I would not say so.
Kapil, your take on this?
Very close to what Gaurav is saying. I do want to say that online education was not a fad. Online education was catering to the requirement that majority of the people cannot afford classroom coaching. It still remains so. I do want to say that there is a huge opportunity in COVID, post-COVID, of building organizations which are extremely transparent, which commit to certain principles, which take extra responsibility. I think health and education are two businesses which come with extra sense of responsibility and which are going to be for-profit organizations. These are great businesses to be built. You can build careers of people and you can make tons of money. But at the base of it lies working with extreme transparency and dealing with students and parents with that extra sense of responsibility.
Ayush?
So, as rightly said, that COVID has just accelerated the adoption for EdTech platform, right? Parents of students who were not at all willing to even taste it at free of cost are pushed, for paying, and searching for it and, paying for it now. Right? So now this entire COVID situation where we are standing right now in COVID time has really let these EdTech products be adopted and get a flavor of it. That has happened, right? That is happening and that will happen for the next 4 I don't know till when COVID happen or until when the schools won't open. But the fact remains, and which I personally believe is any EdTech product in the Indian segment to improve the quality, right? While making the product or education economical, right? Both the things, improve the quality and make the education online learning economical as compared to what is happening physically. I think that those vertical products will thrive beyond COVID. The products which will be at par of cost with what is running in the schools or in physical platforms, I think they would really see a downturn.
Post Sahil will take the audience questions. So Nishi, in case you can help in that. Sahil, please go ahead with your response.
I think I've actually added a lot of comments with COVID. I've seen a couple of founders. I've met them. So what has happened is an acceleration towards online learning. Without COVID, I'm very sure it would have happened. I agree with Kapil when he says that offline coaching is done for good, majorly. So I think in the next 5 or 6 years, you'll see majorly shifting online, and I see no good reason why there will be pockets here and there which will still exist, but this is a major disruption which has happened.
Great. So thanks. Now we are going to audience questions. So I'm getting some questions from the audience. One of the questions that I got is, and Kapil, given you run NEET Prep, so what is the size of market really for, let's say, JEE or NEET as an exam, and how you see this has been growing over last 2-3 years, or how this is like sort of in terms of the market really growing in terms of the NEET and JEE exam, and maybe then probably Ayush you can take on the market size for the segment that you cater to.
Sure. So, Devendra, if you want to look at it purely from an offline perspective, Allen was around 1,000 crore revenues, Akash is 700 crore, at Chaitanya Narayana another 600, 700 crores. So these four and multiply that by 1.5 was the business which was typically generated in offline space. This was typically the number, if I'm not wrong, between 3.5 to 4,000 crores was what between NEET, multiply that by another 1.5, make it NEET and JEE, around 5,000 crores for NEET and JEE offline space, because you'll add FitG, resonance, all of that. My sense is online currently NEET and JEE should be in the range of 90 to 100 crores a year, right? And obviously that top number is going to come down for offline, and online is going to go up. Not all of it is going to be captured out of people who are going there and all of them have shifted online, but a lot of adoption, a lot of people who were not getting served through classroom coaching are going to get served here. In my mind, if you want to size the market, let's say for NEET, and similar method can be applied for JEE, 3.2 million kids, assuming everyone is able to afford 10,000 rupees a year, right? That is a good number to look at. So 3.2 million, 10,000, which is around $150 a year. That is the minimum size of market you can assume. JEE, 2 million, so 5.2 million multiplied by $150 a year is the market size which people can aspire to be out of these two exams. That you keep adding exams like there is a lot of government exams, UPSC, all these things. So this is the size of market I envisage. It started with 5,000, 6,000 crores in online, offline space. Online space, 3.2 million into minimum 150 to 200, 150 to $200. So around 200 to $300 million exists there. That is the minimum size that I can envisage. And obviously, as the value addition keep going up, the prices are going to keep on increasing.
Great. Maybe I can go to next question. So next question, and in case any of you want to take it, please feel free to take it. The question is, pre-COVID, online education was considered more of supplementary education and offline was primary. If a child has to get an admission, that child will probably go to LN and then probably subscribe to either Topper course or Baiju course, etc. Supplementary medium, right? So do we think post-COVID things will come back? Where primary mode for a child or a parent would be still rely the best brand or best teachers out there, and these online player would be more of supplementary, or do we think there would be a permanent paradigm shift in that thought process? Any of you want to take it, please free. I already know Kapil your view. I'll let other panelists take it if they want to take it. Maybe then we can come to you.
I'll take it. May I go ahead?
Sure, Gaurav. Yeah.
So, Devinder, that's a very prudent question. In fact, that's exactly the same statement that I made during my monologue. See, that depends on how fast the COVID is going away. So, there is a saying in English that your separation has to be just enough so that people miss you. But it should not be that great that people learn to live without you. So, what I mean to say here is that if the COVID period is very large, then I think people will not go back to classrooms. They will start to live without it, But if let's assume the coaching centers open tomorrow, I'm very sure that the students will flock them. I'm very sure of it.
You're almost talking about love. If breakup period is short, your chances to get back to your ex, right? if it's long, maybe you will move on. That's very, very, very good analogy, Gaurav. I really love it. Anybody wants to comment more on it? Otherwise, I can go to next question. Okay, go to next question. The next question is do we really have a clear-cut data in terms of success rate provided by these online players? And success rate means whatever they're promising. Success rates in like online exams versus offline players. The data really is not very, very transparent, but do we really see from the customer point of view, online players are rated high because of fundraise, etc. Right? That's their let's say proof of success. But if is there data out which says that because of this institution, so many people are successful? Do we really have data? Anybody knows about it? Any kind of success rate by the student, online versus offline? Anyone wants to take the question, please feel free. Any estimate, anything?
Very, very tricky question. And, if if it was offline coaching previously, one student be named in 8 coaching centers and with different dresses. There was a very interesting creative going on around social media where it was, I think, year 1 or year 2, JEE mains, and she was wearing different dresses of all the uniforms, and someone quoted Three Idiots. So I think it's very difficult to really assess the transparency, and also because students get lured, by just putting their brand value on coaching, and same thing I think is replicated on the tech companies as well. It's very difficult unless students stop doing that. So if student is is loyal to the test prep company offline or online, and they don't sell their brand to any other coaching platform for that matter, then only this transparency can be achieved. Otherwise everyone will boast about it.
Devendra, if I can come in.
Sure.
The challenge with test prep space is 16 lakh students write NEET exam for 34,000 government college seats, right? So you're already talking about an average which is capped at 2.5%. Now, what happens is when a student is from Allen, typically 60 to 70,000 students are going to write exam from Allen in any given year, right? If assuming they have 1% selection, 700 selections are going to be enough to fill 4 to 5 newspaper pages, right? But the selection rate was, let's say, 1%. Now, if I talk about our organization, we had 3,000 students write exam from our platform last year, out of which 38 got selected in government college and pure selections were 18, right? And remaining were, they took something from us and they were taking something from somewhere else. This is typically going to be the story around online and offline. Offline, these numbers are going to be slightly better because you can control the environment for the kid much better. There is also the tendency that if you are good, your first preference, for example, in NEET might be Allen and Akash. And if you're not that good, then you look for option nearby. But I do believe that it is very important that when parents take a decision, a lot of it is driven by the fact that it has been understood that when you put those photographs, no one asks the question, no one checks the data. Ayush was giving example of different kind of ads being run in India compared to US. People are responding to these advertisements, and that is why kids and coaching institutes and everyone else is chasing these photographs on their website. But my belief is once someone starts asking data around, don't tell me exact numbers, tell me the ratio, how many people attempted the exam and how many got selected. Then you would see a lot of parity coming across media. That doesn't happen right now.
Devendra, I would want to add something here.
Sure, Gaurav, please go ahead.
Devendra, one of the problems here is that, and anybody can answer, I'm putting a common question to everyone, okay? The question is, whom do we call our student? Okay, now I have a YouTube channel, there are 8.5 million subscribers, there are 90 million views a month, right? So if somebody sends me an email कि सर आपके वीडियो इतने अच्छे थे, मेरा सिलेक्शन हो गया, अब मैं उसे स्टूडेंट बोलूं कि ना बोलूं, मेरा पेड यूजर तो नहीं है वो, राइट? तो मेरा स्टूडेंट है कौन? मेरा स्टूडेंट वो है जिसने मेरा कोर्स खरीदा है पे करके, जिसने मेरी टेस्ट सीरीज खरीदी है लेकिन कोर्स नहीं खरीदा है. देयर आर सो मेनी लेयर्स कि हम स्टूडेंट कहें किसे. आई नो वन वेबसाइट, आई कैन नॉट नेम इट, आई नो वन वेबसाइट व्हिच आल्सो रन्स अ ऑफलाइन कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूट. और अगर आप उनका वेबसाइट पे जाके, इवन इफ यू सब्सक्राइब टू देयर अपडेट्स, दे कॉल यू देयर स्टूडेंट एंड दे शो योर फेस व्हेन यू गेट सिलेक्टेड ऑन देयर वेबसाइट. So there is no definition कि student कहें किसे हम. Who is my student? The paid one, the free one, someone who is subscribed to my update, someone who has got my test series. Who is the student?
I think that test prep industry need to have a industry body because these things are taken at that level. When I was in Resonance, I tried a lot of effort, but that did not happen. My urge to all the test prep players that you guys should get together in a room or some resort and should not get out till you guys form the industry body and the rules and guidelines, because NASSCOM does a great job for themselves. So that's my you can say view as outside as your comment, Gaurav. I think we are at the end of panel. We had allotted time till 6:35. So I request Nishi or one of the organizers to guide us. Should we continue or we are end of our time? I have more questions from audience, but I'm not too sure on the timing. Can I continue?